The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was falling asleep in my cramped Studio City apartment. The subject line made my heart stop. Callback, lead role, Summit Pictures. I shot upright, nearly dropping my phone as I read the message 3 times before it sank in. After 18 months of auditions, rejections, and soul-crushing waitressing shifts, I had a callback for the lead in an indie film that could change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chen, congratulations on your exceptional audition for the role of Elena in Midnight in Morocco. Your chemistry read with the male lead was outstanding. Please report to Summit Pictures tomorrow at 2 p.m. for your final callback with director James Morrison and producer Victoria Blackwood. This is for the lead role. Do not disappoint us. My hands trembled as I screenshot the email and immediately called my roommate Zara, who was working a night shift at the hospital. She answered on the first ring, her voice tired but instantly alert when she heard my excitement. Maya, that's incredible. Summit Pictures? Isn't that the studio that just got that huge Netflix deal? I paced around our tiny living room, stepping over takeout containers and scripts scattered across the floor. Yes, and James Morrison directed that film that won at Sundance last year. Zara, this could be it. This could actually be happening. But even as the words left my mouth, I could hear my mother's voice echoing in my head from our last phone call 3 weeks ago. Maya, you're 26 years old. When are you going to stop playing pretend and get a real job? Your cousin Jennifer just made partner at her law firm. She has a house, a husband, a future. What do you have? Headshots and empty promises. Before I could second-guess myself, I called home. The phone rang 4 times before my father answered, his voice groggy with sleep. Maya? It's almost midnight. What's wrong? Dad, nothing's wrong. Something amazing happened. I got a callback for a lead role in a major film. The final callback. They loved my audition and... Maya. His voice carried that familiar tone of disappointment I'd grown to dread. We've talked about this. How many callbacks have you had this year? How many times have you gotten excited about some opportunity that leads nowhere? I could hear my mother's voice in the background asking what was wrong. Within seconds, she was on the phone, and I knew I was about to hear the speech I'd memorized by heart. Sweetheart, we love you, but this fantasy has gone on long enough. You're living in a closet-sized apartment, working at a restaurant, and chasing dreams that statistics say will never happen. Do you know what the odds are of making it as an actress in Hollywood? Less than 1%. We didn't immigrate to this country and work 16-hour days so you could waste your education waiting tables. But Mom, this is different. This is Summit Pictures. They specifically asked for me. They asked for you to audition again. That's not a job offer. That's not a contract. That's another carrot on a stick, and you keep chasing it instead of building a real life. The conversation spiraled from there, hitting all the familiar beats. My master's degree in communications going to waste, my college friends who were already buying houses and starting families, the practical realities of health insurance and retirement savings. The conversation ended with my mother's ultimatum, delivered with the authority of someone who had sacrificed everything for their children's supposed success. Maya, we're cutting off the financial support. No more help with rent, no more emergency funds. If you want to continue this acting nonsense, you do it completely on your own. But don't expect us to enable this delusion any longer. I hung up and stared at my phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The financial support wasn't much, $300 a month to help with rent, but it was the difference between surviving and drowning in Los Angeles. More than the money, though, was the message. Your dreams are not worth supporting. I spent the rest of the night rehearsing for the callback, running lines with myself in the bathroom mirror, trying to channel the character of Elena while my parents' words echoed in my head. Elena was a young woman fighting for her independence, refusing to let her family's traditional expectations define her future. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next day, I took 3 buses to get to Summit Pictures, arriving an hour early to sit in my car and center myself. The studio lot was everything I had imagined. Sleek buildings with floor-to-ceiling windows, perfectly manicured landscaping, and people in expensive casual wear walking with purpose between sound stages. This was the world I'd been trying to break into for over a year, and I was finally here, about to audition for a role that could open every door I'd been pounding on. The waiting room was sterile and intimidating, filled with other actresses who all seemed more polished, more confident, more like they belonged there than I did. I watched them flip through their perfectly highlighted scripts while I clutched my dog-eared pages, worn from countless read-throughs in my apartment. When they called my name, I followed a production assistant down a long hallway lined with movie posters from films I'd studied in college. We entered a spacious conference room where 3 people sat behind a large table. A woman with silver hair and designer glasses who commanded the room just by sitting there. A younger man with a beard and an intense stare, and someone I assumed was a casting director based on the stacks of headshots in front of her. Maya Chen, the silver-haired woman said, standing to shake my hand with a grip that felt like a test. I'm Victoria Blackwood, producer. This is James Morrison, our director, and Sarah Kim, casting. We've watched your audition tape several times. You have something we don't see often. James Morrison leaned forward, studying me with a kind of intensity that made me feel like he was seeing straight through to my soul. Elena is complex. She's fighting everyone around her while trying to stay true to herself. There's a scene where she has to choose between her family's approval and her own path. Show us that choice. They gave me the sides, a 2-page scene where Elena confronts her parents about her decision to leave their family business to pursue art. As I read the lines, I felt like Elena's words were my own, like the writers had somehow listened to my phone call that night before and crafted dialogue from my pain. You think I'm being selfish, I said, embodying Elena's fierce determination. But staying here, pretending to want what you want from me, that would be the real betrayal. I'd be betraying myself, and eventually I'd resent you for it. When I finished, the room was quiet for what felt like an eternity. Victoria Blackwood was taking notes, James Morrison was nodding slowly, and Sarah Kim was smiling in a way that made my heart race with hope.
Maya, Victoria said finally, that was extraordinary. You didn't just read those lines, you lived them. There's an authenticity in your performance that we haven't seen from anyone else. James Morrison stood up and walked around the table. Elena isn't just a character to you, is she? This story means something personal. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. It does. I understand what it feels like to love your family but need to disappoint them to be true to yourself. Perfect, Victoria said, making a final note. Maya, we'll be in touch very soon. This was exactly what we were hoping to see. I floated out of that conference room feeling like I was walking on air. The audition had gone better than I could have imagined. I'd connected with the material in a way that felt magical, and the producers had responded to that connection. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe my parents were wrong. Maybe this wasn't an impossible dream after all. I called Zara from the parking lot, barely able to contain my excitement as I recounted every detail of the audition. She screamed so loudly through the phone that other people in the parking lot turned to stare at me. Maya, you nailed it. I can feel it. This is your moment. But as I drove home on the congested 405, reality started creeping back in. Even if I got this role, my parents had made their position clear. I was officially on my own financially, which meant I had exactly 17 days before my rent was due and no idea how I was going to pay it. The callback had gone perfectly, but the rest of my life was still falling apart. The call came exactly 1 week later on a Thursday morning while I was serving coffee to a table of executives discussing their weekend plans in Malibu. My phone buzzed against my apron and I saw Sarah Kim's name flash across the screen. My heart hammered as I excused myself and stepped into the restaurant's storage room, surrounded by boxes of napkins and industrial-sized containers of ketchup. Maya, thank you for your incredible audition last week. Your performance was truly memorable and everyone was impressed by your connection to the material. I held my breath, waiting for the word that would change everything. However, we've decided to go in a different direction. The role of Elena has been offered to someone with more commercial recognition. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. The words hit me like a physical blow. I managed to mumble something that might have been, "Thank you for the opportunity," before ending the call and staring at the boxes around me. More commercial recognition. Translation? Someone with a famous last name or Instagram followers in the millions had walked into that same conference room and made the choice easy for them. I returned to my tables, mechanically refilling coffee cups and taking orders, while my mind reeled. The executives were still discussing their Malibu plans, debating whether to take the yacht or the helicopter. One of them snapped his fingers at me when I didn't immediately notice his empty cup, and I wanted to scream that just last week I'd been in a room where people had called my work extraordinary. That night, Zara found me on our tiny balcony, staring out at the city lights that used to represent possibility, but now just looked like a maze I'd never escape. She sat beside me without saying anything for a long time, both of us watching the steady stream of traffic on the street below. "I'm sorry, Maya. I know how much this meant to you." I laughed, but it came out bitter and hollow. My parents were right. They were completely right, and I was an idiot for thinking otherwise. Do you know what the casting director said? More commercial recognition. All that connection, all that authenticity I thought I had, none of it mattered because I don't have a blue check mark next to my name. Zara reached over and squeezed my hand. One rejection doesn't mean they were right about everything. But it wasn't just one rejection. Over the next 3 months, the pattern became devastatingly clear. I'd book callbacks for smaller roles, independent films, web series, anything that might lead somewhere, and the answer was always the same. Close, but not quite. Impressive, but not what they were looking for. Talented, but not experienced enough. The financial reality hit harder than the professional disappointment. Without my parents' help, I was drowning. I picked up extra shifts at the restaurant, working doubles that left me too exhausted to properly prepare for auditions. I moved out of the apartment I shared with Zara and into a studio in a neighborhood where sirens wailed every night, and the air conditioning hadn't worked since the Clinton administration. My savings disappeared into rent and utilities. I started shopping exclusively at discount grocery stores, living on ramen and whatever meals I could get for free at work. I sold my car and relied on buses that added 2 hours to every trip across the city. The professional headshots I had saved for months to afford became outdated as stress and exhaustion changed my face in ways that makeup couldn't hide. The worst part wasn't the struggle. It was the slow erosion of hope. Every morning I'd check my email for audition notices, and every evening I'd close my laptop having found nothing worth pursuing. The roles I could realistically book were background work that paid barely above minimum wage and offered no path forward. The roles I wanted were reserved for actresses whose agents had connections I'd never access. I started avoiding calls from my college friends, tired of explaining why I was still waiting tables while they discussed promotions and housewarming parties. Social media became torture as I watched former classmates post pictures from work trips and housewarming parties, building lives that looked stable and purposeful, while mine felt like it was disintegrating in real time. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday in November. I'd been called in to cover a shift at the restaurant when another server called in sick, and I spent 8 hours on my feet serving people who treated me like furniture. One woman, roughly my age and wearing jewelry that probably cost more than my annual rent, spent the entire meal complaining about her yoga instructor's scheduling conflicts, while I refilled her water glass. When I got home that night, soaked from the rain and carrying a purse that contained exactly $14.37, I found an eviction notice taped to my door. 3 days to pay the outstanding balance or face legal action. I sat on the floor of my empty studio apartment. I'd already sold most of my furniture, and called my parents for the first time in 2 months. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice immediately concerned when she heard me crying. "Mom, I need help. I'm about to be evicted, and I don't have anywhere else to turn. I know what you said about cutting me off, but I'm drowning here." There was a long pause before she responded, her voice gentler than I'd heard her in years. "Oh, sweetheart, come home. Just come home."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
You've been trying for almost 2 years. You've given it everything you have, and it's not working. That doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit when something isn't meant to be. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that I just needed one break, one person to believe in me the way Victoria Blackwood had seemed to for those brief moments in that conference room. But sitting on the floor of an apartment I couldn't afford, wearing clothes that smelled like grease from the restaurant, I couldn't find the words to defend a dream that felt more like a delusion every day. There's a position at your father's accounting firm, my mother continued. It's entry level, but it has benefits and room for growth. You could move back into your old room until you save enough for your own place. Maya, you're brilliant and hardworking. You could build a good life here. A good life. Safe, predictable, practical. Everything I'd sworn I didn't want, but suddenly it sounded like salvation. I'd been so focused on the life I thought I wanted that I'd nearly destroyed the life I actually had. That weekend, I packed my remaining belongings into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Zara helped me clean the apartment, both of us pretending this was temporary, even though we both knew better. She hugged me at the bus station, making me promise to keep in touch and to remember that taking a step back wasn't the same as giving up forever. The bus ride to Sacramento took 6 hours, giving me plenty of time to stare out the window and watch Los Angeles disappear behind me. Every mile felt like defeat, like proof that my parents had been right all along about the impossibility of my dreams. I'd spent 2 years fighting for something that had never been mine to claim, and all I had to show for it was debt, exhaustion, and the bitter taste of failure. When my parents picked me up at the bus station, they didn't say, "I told you so," even though they had every right to. My father carried my suitcases to the car, while my mother wrapped me in a hug that felt like forgiveness. On the drive home, they talked about ordinary things: the weather, neighborhood news, plans for Thanksgiving, carefully avoiding any mention of acting or Hollywood or the dreams I was leaving behind. My childhood bedroom looked exactly the same, frozen in time like a museum display of the person I used to be before I thought I could conquer the world. I lay in my twin bed that first night, staring at the ceiling and wondering if this was what growing up actually meant: not achieving your dreams, but learning to live without them. The accounting firm of Chen and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a glass building in downtown Sacramento, and for 8 months, I'd been processing tax returns and reconciling ledgers with the mechanical precision of someone who'd accepted that passion was a luxury she couldn't afford. My days blended into each other. Coffee at 7, spreadsheets until noon, lunch at my desk while reviewing client files, more spreadsheets until 6. It was exactly the stable, predictable life my parents had wanted for me. I was competent at the work, even good at it, but every morning felt like putting on a costume that didn't quite fit. My colleagues were kind enough, though they seemed puzzled by my occasional references to film theory or my ability to quote entire scenes from movies they'd never heard of. During lunch breaks, while they discussed mortgage rates and weekend plans, I found myself staring out the window at the sky and wondering what I might have been doing in Los Angeles at that exact moment. My parents were thrilled with my transformation. At family dinners, my mother would beam as she told relatives about my steady job and benefits package, as if I'd finally become the daughter she'd always wanted. My father had started talking about promoting me to senior associate within the year, mapping out a career path that led to partnership and suburban comfort. They'd been right about everything, and I hated how much that hurt. It was a Wednesday in March when everything changed. I was reviewing quarterly reports for a chain of dry cleaners when my personal phone buzzed with a call from an unknown Los Angeles number. I almost ignored it. Most calls from LA were either spam or reminders of a life I was trying to forget, but something made me step into the empty conference room and answer. Maya Chen, this is Victoria Blackwood from Summit Pictures. I hope you remember me. My knees went weak and I gripped the edge of the conference table to steady myself. Victoria
Blackwood, the producer who'd called my audition extraordinary before ultimately choosing someone with more commercial recognition. Miss Blackwood, of course I remember you. How did you get this number? I have my ways, she said with a laugh that sounded genuinely warm. Maya, I'm calling because I've been thinking about you for months. That audition you gave us was remarkable, and I've regretted our decision ever since. I sank into one of the conference room chairs, my heart pounding so hard I sure he could hear it through the phone. I appreciate you saying that, but if this is about another audition, I should tell you that I'm not acting anymore. I moved back home and I'm working in a different field now. I know exactly where you are and what you're doing. I also know that the actress we chose instead of you turned our project into a disaster. The film was completely reshot, went millions over budget, and still tested terribly with audiences. Meanwhile, I haven't been able to get your performance out of my head. She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Maya, I'm developing a new project, and I want you for the lead. Not as a backup choice, not as a consolation prize. You're my first choice, my only choice. I laughed, but it came out shaky and disbelieving. Miss Blackwood, I appreciate the call, but that's not realistic. I don't have representation anymore. I don't even have current headshots. I'm an accountant now. You're an actress who's temporarily doing accounting. There's a difference. Listen to me carefully, Maya. This project is different. It's a limited series for a major streaming platform about young professionals who give up their dreams for security, only to discover that security without passion is its own kind of prison. The lead character is a former artist working in finance. Sound familiar? My mouth dried. You're offering me a lead role in a series? I'm offering you the lead role. 6 episodes, each one an hour long. The budget is substantial, the writing is exceptional, and the platform has already greenlit it based on the pilot script. Maya, this isn't a favor or charity. This is business. You're the right actress for this role, and I've learned not to compromise on casting when I know I've found the right person. I stared out the conference room window at the parking lot where my father's sensible sedan sat next to my coworkers' equally sensible cars. Why now? Why me? You could have any established actress for a project like this. Because established actresses haven't lived this story. They can't access the authenticity you brought to that audition room 8 months ago. Maya, I need someone who understands what it feels like to sacrifice dreams for safety, because that's the emotional core of this entire series. Victoria went on to explain the project in detail. The series was called Safe Harbor, and it followed 6 young adults who had abandoned creative careers for traditional jobs, only to find unexpected ways back to their passions. The streaming platform had committed to significant promotional support, and several A-list actors had already signed on for supporting roles.
The character's name is Elena, Victoria said, and I nearly dropped the phone. Yes, the same name from the film role. I liked the character so much that I bought the rights to develop her further. Maya, Elena was always meant to be yours. When the call ended, I sat in that conference room for 20 minutes, staring at my reflection in the black computer screen and trying to process what had just happened. Victoria Blackwood wanted me for the lead in a major streaming series. She'd specifically developed a project with me in mind. After 8 months of spreadsheets and surrender, someone in Hollywood still believed I was worth taking a chance on. The practical part of my brain immediately started listing obstacles. I'd have to quit my job, disappoint my parents again, and move back to Los Angeles with no guarantee that this opportunity wouldn't evaporate like the last one. But underneath the fear was something I'd almost forgotten existed: excitement. Pure electric excitement at the possibility of stepping back into the world I'd been forced to leave behind. That evening, I sat at the dinner table with my parents, picking at my mother's carefully prepared salmon while they discussed plans for my cousin's wedding and my father's upcoming golf tournament. They talked around me rather than to me, content in the knowledge that I'd finally settled into the life they'd wanted for me. I got an interesting phone call today, I said during a lull in the conversation. My mother looked up from her plate, immediately alert to any change in my routine. Oh, work-related? Not exactly. Victoria Blackwood called me. She's a producer in Los Angeles. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father set down his fork with deliberate precision, and my mother's expression shifted to the one she wore when she was preparing for battle. Maya, my father said carefully, please tell me you're not considering getting involved with that industry again. She offered me the lead role in a streaming series. 6 episodes, major platform, substantial budget. It's exactly the kind of opportunity I used to dream about. My mother's voice was sharp with concern. Maya, we've been through this. You tried that path and it nearly destroyed you. You're doing well here. You're stable. You're successful in your own way. Why would you risk all of that for another impossible dream? I looked across the table at my parents, these two people who loved me enough to watch me fail rather than support what they saw as delusion. For the first time in months, I felt like I could see clearly. Because it's not impossible, I said quietly. It was hard, it was unlikely, but it wasn't impossible. Victoria Blackwood didn't call me out of pity or nostalgia. She called me because I'm the right person for this role, and she knows it. My father leaned back in his chair, his expression a mixture of frustration and resignation. And what happens when this project falls through? What happens when they decide to go with someone else again? Then I'll deal with that when it happens. But Dad, what if it doesn't fall through? What if this is exactly what I've been working toward all along? What if you and Mom were wrong about my dreams being impossible? The silence stretched between us, filled with 8 months of careful peace and 2 years of old arguments. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice softer than I'd expected. The producer who called you, she really believes you're right for this role? I nodded. She said I was her first choice, her only choice. She's been thinking about me for months. My parents exchanged a look across the table, one of those wordless conversations that couples have after decades of marriage. When my mother turned back to me, her eyes were bright with something that might have been pride. Then maybe, she said slowly, maybe we were wrong about your dreams being impossible. Maybe we were just scared of watching you get hurt again. 2 weeks later, they drove me to the airport, my father carrying my suitcases while my mother pressed an envelope of emergency money into my hands despite my protests. At the security checkpoint, she hugged me tighter than she had since I was a child. Maya, she whispered, show them what we've always known about you. Show them how extraordinary you are. 18 months later, I stood on a red carpet in Beverly Hills wearing a designer gown that the stylist had insisted was perfect for my skin tone, facing a wall of photographers whose cameras flashed like lightning. Safe Harbor had become the streaming platform's most watched series of the year, earning critical acclaim and a devoted fan base who connected deeply with Elena's journey from corporate conformity back to authentic living. The series had exceeded everyone's expectations, including mine. What started as 6 episodes became a 2-season commitment with international distribution deals and award nominations that made my phone ring constantly with new opportunities. Victoria Blackwood had been right about everything. The authenticity I brought to Elena's story resonated with audiences who saw their own abandoned dreams reflected in her character. At the premiere after-party, Victoria found me near the dessert table, where I was hiding from the overwhelming attention and trying to process how dramatically my life had changed. Maya, she raised her champagne glass, I told you that you were my first choice, my only choice. Do you believe me now? I laughed, thinking about the girl who'd answered her phone call in a Sacramento conference room, convinced that Hollywood had forgotten her completely. I believe you now. Thank you for seeing something in me that I'd stopped seeing in myself. That's exactly why you are perfect for this role. Elena's story is your story. The courage to risk everything for a dream, the wisdom to know when to step back, and the strength to try again when the right opportunity appears. My parents flew out for the premiere, my mother clutching my father's arm as they navigated their first Hollywood event. They watched from the audience as I accepted the award for Outstanding Lead Performance in a Drama Series, my speech thanking them for loving me enough to let me fail and find my way back to success. Later that night, as we sat in my new apartment overlooking the Hollywood Hills, my father shook his head in amazement. Maya, I owe you an apology. We were so afraid of watching you struggle that we tried to convince you your dreams were impossible. But impossible just means it hasn't happened yet. My mother smiled, her eyes bright with tears. The producer was right to disagree with us. Sometimes parents don't know everything about what their children are capable of achieving. The next morning, I woke up to hundreds of messages from young actors thanking me for proving that dreams deferred aren't necessarily dreams denied. My story had become their inspiration, proof that the path to success isn't always linear, and that sometimes the biggest risk is giving up too soon. Victoria had already sent me 3 new scripts to consider, each one offering roles that a year ago would have seemed impossibly out of reach. But now I understood what she'd tried to tell me during that first phone call. Talent combined with persistence and the right opportunity can overcome any statistical impossibility. My parents had been right about my dreams being impossible, but they'd been right about one thing. I was extraordinary. I just needed someone in Hollywood to disagree with their timeline for when that extraordinarity would finally be recognized. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.